Good morning. Good to see a big crowd for a holiday weekend. Welcome to our church, the Unitarian Church of Hinsdale, a church that has stood on the sacred ground for 137 years. We acknowledge its history and the legacy of this land, which was once lived upon by indigenous people. May we consider and accept this inheritance with open hearts and welcoming arms. No matter who you are, who you love, or where you are in your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you are invited to sign the visitor's book at the desk in the living room after the service. We hope you will visit us often and decide to join us in membership. If you have questions, feel free to ask the person at the desk or join us downstairs after the service for cool drinks and corner someone. They will be glad to answer your questions. During the summer, we meet outdoors at 10 to take advantage of the cooler temperatures. However, today, due to the video that we'll be showing, we are gathering inside where there is air conditioning. Our minister, Reverend Beth Johnson, will return in late August, as will our Director of Children's Program, Pam Fodor. In the meantime, members of our worship committee will be responsible for the summer services, and the children will be in attendance with the adults. Children are welcome to use the activities available in the living room during the service. Ron and I, Anita, are your worship leaders today. Our theme is A Jurist for Our Time, Robert H. Jackson. How many have heard of Robert H. Jackson? Raise your hand. Okay. Today we thank Carolyn, who is providing our music today. Thanks to the hospitality team and to our tech gurus, Alex and Jean, who work diligently every Sunday so we can be technologically savvy. Thank you for helping. Call to worship. We come together in this hour to share our lives and our spiritual values. It is here where together we work for a better world and for a peaceful and meaningful life for all. This is our sacred hour. From our shared histories of ancestors who have walked this earth, we are grateful for their gifts, their lessons, and the challenge they charge to us to be accountable and responsible in our effort to fulfill the hopes and aspirations for a peaceful and loving world. May what our ancestors dream be ours to do. Please join us in saying our chalice words. This church is made up of all of us. Thank you. We have something else on the paper.
If you have something dancing in your heart, a joy or concern, you're invited to share it with this community in silence or in voice. As you do, you may drop a pebble in the water of life as an affirmation of your joy or concern. Please come forward if you have either a joy or concern.
Hi, I'm Dave. We had a very good time at the 4th of July parade in Brookfield. We marched in the parade with the Brookfield Native Plants Club, and Charlie and Susan from church came, and we had a bunch of people. You might have met Mike the Monarch. He participated in the parade as well.
Any other joys or concerns? Stan?
I have both a joy and a concern. The joy is that it is still a free enough country for me to wear a flag and a shirt that says, well, totally unhinged liberal. And thank you. And my concern is that a year from now, on our 250th anniversary, some White House is going to find a way to turn it into something that is totally the best celebration we've ever seen. Nobody's ever seen anything like it, and it'll be all about him.
Any other joys or concerns? Needed you? Let us share a moment of silence as we hold in our hearts the unspoken joys and concerns in our own lives. Okay, please turn to hymn 159, and we'll be using as the second hymn as well, the music Finlandia, but you're going to be singing the words that are in the hymnal, so that's 159.
We support this church in many ways, but our involvement on the many committees that sustain our values and through our financial support. Please join in our offertory words. It is what we learn together, the work we do together, the fun we have together. It is what we share with one another and with people and with all the world. Okay.
So who was this Robert H. Jackson? He lived from February 13th, 1892 to October 9th, 1954. So pretty much all of us would be around when he was still living. He was an American lawyer, a jurist, and a politician who served as an Associate Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court from 1941 until his death in 1954. He had previously served as the United States Solicitor General and United States Attorney General, and is the only person to have held all three of those offices. Jackson was also notable for his work at the Nuremberg trials, prosecuting Nazi war criminals following World War II, in all with no official law degree. Had no law degree. Amazing. Jackson developed a reputation as one of the best writers on the Supreme Court and one of the most committed to enforcing due process as protection from overreaching federal agencies. And now we'd like to show a brief video. This is the... The video comes shortly.
Over 20 years ago, maybe almost 25, Paul and I first heard a lecture about Robert H. Jackson at Chautauqua Institution. It was sponsored by the Jackson Center in Jamestown, New York, which we visited this last summer. And the center is only 12 miles from Chautauqua, so if you ever go to Chautauqua, it's a short run down the road. I remember the lecture from years ago, and visiting of the center last summer brought back memories of the 40s and World War II, and revived in my memory the photos taken of Nazi atrocities that were on the newsreels, in the movie houses, on the radio, and in the newspapers. I was a young girl of 13 in 1945. It was then that I discovered there was real evil in the world. What I see happening now in this country has reactivated my interest in Jackson and the desire to do more to avert the abuse of power that I see happening in our government. I want to do more, and I hope you do too. A month or so ago, in a conversation with Ron, he mentioned his lawyer brother was an admirer of Jackson. Surprised to hear that someone else was familiar with his work, we continued our conversation and decided to do this service. If I may just get political. Pete Buttigieg said recently, quote, "It's been 249 years since we declared independence from a king. The work of living up to our promise is more important than ever, and it calls on each of us to do what we can for our country." We will now have the video.
We are able to do away with domestic tyranny and violence and aggression by those in power against the rights of their own people only when we make all men answerable to the law.
On November 21st, 1945, Robert Jackson was at the height of his prestige. The world watched as he started the most famous trial in history. A trial that would bring high-ranking Nazi leaders to justice. Jackson was the only American ever to have served as Solicitor General, Attorney General, and Associate Justice of the United States Supreme Court.
His post-high school education includes no general college experience at all. Not a day on a college campus taking college courses.
A member of President Franklin Roosevelt's inner circle, he had taken Treasury Secretary Andrew Mellon to court for back taxes and won. Successfully defended New Deal legislation before the Supreme Court, stood toe-to-toe with J. Edgar Hoover over illegal wiretapping, and became FDR's most trusted legal advisor on the war.
He's a revolutionary, and revolutionaries are not always accepted in their time.
As an Associate Justice on the Supreme Court, he would become a fierce defender of civil liberties and establish limits on executive power. His friend Franklin Roosevelt had died. Now President Truman was asking him to prosecute the evil Nazi war machine at the first international criminal court in the history of the world. A brilliant writer and powerful speaker, Jackson had won nearly every oral argument he'd made before the Supreme Court. Could he win this trial too? And if he did, would the condemnation of aggressive war and the murder of 6 million people prevent it from happening again? Faith in the law is our last best hope, he would later write. But Jackson was a practical man, and he knew that faith would be tested again.
What follows, and we aren't going to play it for today, an hour-long documentary on television. We thought the introduction to that documentary was very special, and it gave you kind of an overview of Johnson. And I might add, by the way, that Anita and I are putting together, we have the history newsletter that we send out every 2 weeks, And the upcoming newsletter will be really address Jackson, I should say, and give you some resources to go to. So if you wish to get that particular newsletter, you'll get it anyway if you're on our subscription list. But if you'd like to get us this particular copy about Jackson, there's a sign-up sheet back there at the table that you can put your name and your email, and you'll get that newsletter coming up. It'll come out in a couple of weeks. This is a specific story about Jackson and who he was and what he did. 9-year-old Kathy Barnett and her 8-year-old sister Marie stood respectfully and silently while their classmates saluted the American flag. They did not. They had no idea that their act of faith would place them at the center of a landmark Supreme Court case in 1943. For their courageous stand, Kathy and Marie were expelled from the Slip Hill Grade School in West Virginia. Their father fought the case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. The court ruled on June 14, 1943, that schools cannot force children to salute the flag, making special note that Jehovah's Witnesses intend no disrespect for either the flag or the country. As Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, writing on behalf of the court, words the following, echoing especially to us this very day. He said, "If there is any fixed star in our Constitution, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, or religion." Following that, the New York Times said of Johnson's words, "One of the most notable writings in the court's history, and I might add, for the ages and especially ours today." Anita, do you have some?
What a man. Started out as a farmer, lived on the land, went to school, got good grades, and was fascinated with speaking. His father wouldn't give him money to go to college, so because of that, there was always some tension between his father and him. But he did it himself. His mother's brother loaned him the money to go to school, and he went for 1 year to work as an apprentice in a law office. And like Abraham Lincoln, that was his only education to law. And he studied, he wrote, and he got very popular in the area of Chautauqua, Freesburg, and Jamestown. And he was a local lawyer and involved in democratic politics. And FDR heard of him, invited him to come to Washington, and he became a Solicitor General. From there, he moved up to United States District Attorney. From there, he went on to become Supreme Court Justice. And FDR told him that he had in mind to have him become Chief Justice someday when one of the justices retired. Well, that didn't happen because FDR died and Truman came in. And there was some competition. Other associate justices seemed to want the chief justice position. So Truman thought not to take sides, and he appointed Chief Justice Vincent to fill in for the vacancy. So Jackson could have been a wonderful chief of the courts, but he used his talents in other ways. So during the war, when Truman came in, he said he wanted Jackson to become Chief United States Prosecutor for the Nuremberg trials. Never before have people been arrested or tried for their war crimes, and this was the first time. So Jackson became chief prosecutor for the United States and used that position 1 full year. The trials went on for 1 full year. But he wasn't only responsible for that. He had to get the 4 nations together and come to some common ground on how to conduct the trials. The 4 nations were France, Great Britain with Northern Ireland, Russia, and the United States. So 8 months prior to the Nuremberg trials on behalf of the United States, the London Agreement was signed along with the 4 nations, and this created the International Military Tribunal, the mission of which was to prosecute and punish the major war crimes of the European enemies, Axis. Annexed to this agreement was the Nuremberg Charter, which defined the tribunal's constitution, its procedures, the laws under which the trial was to be conducted, and the crimes to be prosecuted, which included 3 main categories: crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. It was the first time in history that a war of aggression was declared a crime. And throughout everything I read, there was not one mention of a Holocaust. And I found out that the term wasn't used until later, 1920s, to describe what happened to the Jewish people during that time. What a job this was. Can you imagine trying to get 4 nations who have different legal systems to come together on a common procedure to run a trial in different languages? So it was a big job, but he did it. He got the 4 nations to agree to common procedures. He led the negotiations to find a system of legality that would be amenable to each of the nation's legal systems. Remember, all 4 nations had their own legal system and language. And it was his job to find common ground to conduct the trial. Jackson's deliberateness, his fairness, and his push for sacrifice and compromise. He asked them, you've got to sacrifice and you've got to compromise. That's what he asked the 4 nations. And it led to the London Agreement and the procedures, the items of procedures on what is called the Nuremberg Charter. The London Agreement agreed to have the trial. The Nuremberg Charter listed all the items of procedure and how they were to operate. Eventually, 17 countries signed along with the 4 nations. The opening statement, Jackson read the opening statement, and it's one of the classic and more eloquent oratories of law. It took 33 pages for him to read, 3.5 hours for him to read it, and 2,500 words. And if you watch the video, he spoke very slowly. You know why? Interpreters had to interpret in 4 different languages. So if you find it on Google, and if you've got a good hour to read the opening statement. It's incredible. It lays down the rule of law of how they were to function. And it was clear and understandable. I read the closing statement at a year later. He read the closing statement. And that is even more amazing, because in it, he combined everything that went on in the trial. This man was just an incredible writer, thinker. And now, 85 years later, his statement remains as one of the most significant and one of the most often cited, affirming the role and responsibility of international law and human rights. It serves as a foundation for the international law and for the international crime trials to this present day. I thought that there was just one Nuremberg trial, but after 1 year, his trial concluded, and there were 13 other trials that took place. What they did was categorize the crimes. And so for one trial, they prosecuted the doctors who did experiments on humans. Another trial, they prosecuted the military, the Gestapo and SS. And that's why the Nuremberg trials actually extended from 1945 to 1949. In 2019, Henry T. King, then president of the International Criminal Court, stated in a keynote speech, "There would be no Nuremberg without Robert H. Jackson." Lastly, Jackson describes what a good prosecutor is, and clearly explains why he was so successful in that role, and also as a Supreme Court judge, where he wrote over 300 opinions. He said that a good prosecutor should possess, quote, be sensitive to fair play and sportsmanship, tempered zeal with human kindness, seek truth, not victims, serve the law and not factional purposes, and approach his task with humility. And what I read about Robert Jackson was all about humility and consideration, and this comes out in all his quotes. I continue to read about Jackson, and we do have a little time. I'm just going to go over what I was surprised at and learned. In 1942, how many have heard of the Karematsu case that had to do with the relocation of Japanese Americans in 1942? Fred Karematsu brought this to court. He got some lawyers and said, "This infringes on my Fifth Amendment and 14th Amendment rights. You can't do this." for the principles, following the principles that he stated in his opening statement, he believed that individuals, not nations, are responsible for international law violations. Fair trial based on the rule of law and due process is right. Individual leaders included should be held accountable for aggressive wars. Authentic and well-documented historical evidence is crucial in prosecuting criminals. The law must reach those who use their power and instigate atrocities. No impunity to those in power. So that was the foundation for his thinking on court procedures and what should happen. In the Karamazov case, he's definitely, in his opinions, there were 3 dissenting opinions to the order that FDR put out, and he was one of them. And each of the opinions suggests that it was not constitutional to take a group of people due to their background, their heritage, and blame them when they had actually done nothing wrong. So he lost the case, was sent to the internment camps, and was there for 2.5 years. When he left, he moved to Detroit. The law wouldn't let him go back to California, even though they allowed his family to go back. So he claimed that his rights had been violated, and his lawyers challenged the government in this case. The conviction was upheld until 1940, I can't remember the year, but it was several years, 53, I think. And it went to court. The case was reopened, and he was freed of his, let's see if I can find it. He was absolved of his crime, so to speak. And so he went to Detroit, married, had 2 children. And it didn't say too much about his experience in the internment camps. His daughter was 16 years old and sitting in the classroom one day and heard a report given by a fellow classmate. And it was on the 1944 Karamazov case. His daughter never heard of this at all, and told her brother. Then they were very surprised, and they delved into his history and found out what had happened and what had happened to the case. So she went to school and got her degree and founded the Fred Karamazov Center. And it's dedicated to social justice, civil rights, and she goes around the country speaking to other organizations that sponsor the same work. What surprised me is in reading about this center, reading about who the center collaborates with, it came up Robert H. Jackson Center. So I looked that collaboration up, and on several occasions, the 2 centers have gotten together for events. She has lectured there, and I guess they have gone to the Karamazov Center for events also. But that didn't stop there. I found Benjamin Ferencz. Don't know if you're familiar with that. I wasn't. He's another Nuremberg prosecutor who prosecuted the military. And his son founded a center, as Karen did for her father. So there are other organizations around the country who are doing similar things. So look them up on Google. Ron and I will have our list of resources next week, I hope. And you can look them up. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. In 1998, Karamazov received the Medal of Freedom from Bill Clinton. And read his history and the work that he's done. It's fascinating. Lastly, Jackson describes what a good prosecutor is, and this explains why he was so successful in his role as prosecutor and also as Supreme Court judge. And he wrote 300 opinions when he was in the Supreme Court. He said that a good prosecutor should possess a sensitiveness to fair play and sportsmanship, tempered with zeal and human kindness, seek truth, not victims, serve the law, not factual purposes, and approach his task with humility. And this was Jackson. As I said, he is one of my heroes, and he's worth following with his quotes. If you go on Google, there are a series of his quotes that they have collected, and that they're fascinating. At Chautauqua each year, there's an annual Robert H. Jackson lecture that is presented. This August, a woman by the name of Kim Lane Chappelli she's an authority on authoritarianism, and she's going to speak in August. I hope we're going to be there then. So we'll see. Try to get her on Google if you can. Another speaker that we heard at Chautauqua this last summer was Kate Shaw. She's a professor of law at University of Pennsylvania. And last summer, her lecture was on the Supreme Court. She is the wife of Chris Hayes of MSNBC, and she is also daughter of Andy Shaw, former reporter for ABC, Chicago reporter. So that was fun to see her and meet her. Okay.
I'd like to add something about something he wrote. It probably is in your mind, what was Jackson's religion? Well, he wasn't Unitarian. Sounds like he should have been. But he was essentially all religions. After his death, several handwritten pages that he had written about his faith. In fact, he called it the faith of my fathers. He was raised in Pennsylvania, a very conservative area, and among conservative religions, but his sense was no interference with other people's religions. That's their business. And I guess I would say, based on what we're hearing, is that he really touched in all religions in so many respects. His words from this 13 pages: I was reared in an atmosphere of perfect respect for the religion's views of others, or at least a respect to the personal right to have any religion one preferred. And we'll be summarizing this 13 pages. We're not going to include all of them, but in the newsletter coming up, and you can read some of his ideas about religion and tolerance at this point. And be sure to, if you are not getting the history newsletter, sign up on that sheet in the back. And if you're not able to get to it up here, I'll take it downstairs so you can sign up for the newsletter. If you're already getting the history newsletter, you don't have to sign up again. At this point, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to be singing hymn 318, We Would Be One. And, but you're going to be singing along with what you see on our screen. So Carolyn won't be playing necessarily with this one, but we thought we'd kind of have you sing along. And we're still using Finlandia as the music. So turn to page, or to hymn number 318, We Would Be One. And let me see if we can get this going. Yeah.
May the light of this flame linger in our hearts as gratitude for the lives of those who have long since passed, but whose legacy has made a worthy path for us to follow. Please join in the words to extinguish the flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the warmth of this community, nor the fire of our commitment. These we carry in our hearts and share with all the world. Closing words.
And as closing words, we thought this would be especially appropriate. I can find them here. The words I'm going to have to go from memory, but it's very short. His gravestone had nothing on it except for one phrase, which was, he stood for what was and dedicated himself to what will be. And those were apparently put on that stone by his relatives because there was nothing else other than, of course, his name on that stone. At this point, we'll close with music by our pianist.